So welcome everybody to moving to Drupal 9 from Drupal 7, leading edge user experience, full horsepower for the future, or as I like to call it, how many words can we fit on a title slide? My name is James Nettik. I'm a senior dev manager here at Aten Design Group. I've been with the company coming up on 8 years now, and I work basically with Drupal in any capacity you can, from theming to module development, and definitely my fair share of migrations and API integrations. So that's a little bit about me.
And I'm Jordan Graham. I'm a senior developer here with Aten Design Group, and been here since right before the pandemic. I have experience with Drupal since the end of Drupal 5 back in the day. And I've also got experience with WordPress and other content management systems, including one I wrote myself about 20 years ago.
Awesome. So if I'm assuming the reason that most of the people are attending this webinar is that you all are one of the almost 500,000 sites that are still on Drupal 7. And as Joe alluded to, Drupal 7 is going to be becoming end of life as of November next year. And so the question becomes, what all are you going to do moving forward? And as Joe mentioned, this is a series of the first of 3 webinars going into at least some of the options that we've identified. If Backdrop or WordPress are things that you want to explore, definitely feel free to attend my colleagues' webinars coming up in the next couple months, and we'll have more information about dates and times at the end of this. But for now, we're going to talk about Drupal. And I think the first thing to mention about migrating from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9, one of the biggest advantages is you're going to still be on Drupal, and that creates a lot of ease in terms of the complexity of the migration. But I think one of the biggest selling points there is you're not going to have to relearn a new system. I think one of the drawbacks is if your content authors or people who use your website aren't used to WordPress, there might be a learning curve that they might have to learn a new system, how to author content, which if you stick with Drupal, Drupal 9 offers a lot of new capabilities, and we'll talk a lot more about that. But at the end of the day, you'll still have the same feeling system when you move to Drupal 9. One of the first things that I think we really should talk about in Drupal 9 is a stable release cycle. Again, one of the reasons that we're even having this series of webinars is historically migration or upgrades to Drupal from Drupal 6 to Drupal 7, and Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, Drupal 9. Those are huge tasks that require almost complete rebuilds of your entire system. And that was something that Drupal really sought to fix from 8 going forward. So, no more do you have to completely think about rebuilding your website when you're going from, say, 8 to 9 or from 9 into 10. What they did is they started releasing new features a lot more incrementally. So you'll hear more people talk about things like minor releases. And that's an example of moving from, say, Drupal 9.2 to 9.3. And the nice thing is you get a whole lot of new features a lot quicker than we have historically seen in previous releases of Drupal. We'll talk a little bit more about those features, but it really speeds up development. And then the nice thing is when we have to go, say, from 9 to 10, it's no longer a rebuild. What it is more of an act of cleaning house. It's removing some deprecated APIs and some cruft from earlier versions. And so you get the same system, but just with a lighter code base without the need for a complete rebuild. And we've seen that come to fruition with the update from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, and we expect 9 to 10 to go the same way. The other thing too is they're a lot more stable with how they're releasing minor fixes. So monthly they do 2 releases. One is a bug fix and one is a security fix. And those are timed out in a way that you're able to budget and plan accordingly around. And it provides a lot of really nice consistency around release cycles. The other thing that you'll get is a dedicated security team for core code. So I mentioned, once a month they're doing security releases, and the security team manages the conversations around, making sure that the Drupal code is as stable or as secure as possible. And then the communications of, there's been a new vulnerability that was determined, here's the fix, does it apply to you? And they kind of manage a lot of those things. So you have a security team vetting the code that's powering your website. part of that security team is just or part of the benefits on top of that security team is just the extended Drupal community and the suite of modules that you have available to you. Last I checked, there's roughly 10,000 modules that are contributed just for Drupal 9 alone. And that provides a lot of already built solutions to problems that you might face going into a project. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a module is going to solve your problem 100%, but in my experience, the module might get you 75% of the way there, and then your dev team can make up the last 25% and even contribute that code back and help sort of pay it forward in the community. On top of that, you get a lot of support in the form of developers and teams at conferences and meetups. You have the issue queue, which tends to be pretty active in terms of getting fixes out. And then you have Slack channels for various aspects of Drupal core that you or your team can go in and start chatting with just other Drupal developers in the community to try and get more real-time support from maybe an issue you might be running into. When I started doing Drupal, however many years ago, I think one of the first things I heard was you come for the code and stay for the community. And I think over a decade later, that adage still holds true to me. On top of the security team and contributed modules also have a security policy that they should adhere to. Now, it's worth mentioning that not every module that gets released to Drupal to the Drupal ecosystem is covered by the security policy. But what's really nice is that the project pages for these provide a lot of information, including this little label that says this module does adhere to our security policy. It's been vetted, it's been reviewed, and that provides at least some peace of mind when you're looking for a new module and trying to vet it for various things, that this one is secure. I know some other systems don't quite have that same sort of structure, and I think Jordan can speak to that a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, thank you, James. As I mentioned earlier, I have done some work with WordPress as well. And in the WordPress ecosphere, so they don't have modules, they have plugins to provide certain functionality. And so when I'm looking for a plugin in the WordPress world, anybody can submit plugins, and there can be dozens of plugins that purport to provide certain functionality, and there's no indication which of them have been peer reviewed for security. So there's nothing comparable to this, which is why I've always felt that the Drupal content management system is better for enterprise level solutions than WordPress. And this is just one of those examples, is that with Drupal, you can, in some cases, be sure that code has been security reviewed by your peers.
Awesome. I remembered that was there this time, and it didn't catch me off guard. So we're going strong. But among a lot of the features that were released over the life of Drupal 8 and Drupal 9, I think one of the biggest ones to talk about is media management. This was something that was kind of addressed or tackled in varying different ways in Drupal 7. But what's nice about the media management system that's in Drupal core now is it turns your website into the canonical repository for all of the assets that your online team might need. So rather than basically having to re-upload the same image a dozen times because you want to use it in a dozen different places, whoever uploads an image into Drupal the first time, that image becomes available to anybody else who's authoring content to essentially just reuse. And this isn't just applicable to images. This applies to videos. This applies to PDFs, audio clips, basically any form of media that you might be using. It becomes a shared asset on the website. And the nice thing about that then is, let's say you end up in a situation where you're looking at an image and you're like, we need to upload a different version of it or a higher quality version of it, rather than having to find all of the places you've uploaded this one file into the system. You just go to that one image and you can swap out the file, and anywhere it's being used is going to inherit that change. Now, with that sort of distributed system for how we use images and media on the website, one thing that comes up is control. And Drupal, again, shines, I think, really well in managing these things. So using images, again, is a primary example. Wherever we're using images, it's going to be probably needed to be manipulated in a lot of different ways. So if we're thinking responsive images, you're going to want a different image size served up depending on the device that you're on and the screen size. Drupal can handle that automatically. So all you have to do is upload the large high-res version, and Drupal takes care of scaling and cropping and creating the derivatives so your content authors don't have to. And this is true for not only responsive, but we might use a primary image on a blog post as a banner on the post page, but as a tiny thumbnail on a list page. And again, Drupal handles resizing and cropping all of those images for you. So it takes a little bit of work off your author. One thing that you can kind of run into when dealing with sort of systems that take that design control into their own hands is, a good example is you upload a photo of a person and the thumbnail crops off the top of their head. And we'll look at this here in a little bit, but what you'll see is we can actually provide some tools that let your authors within the system itself provide some of that more art direction control over maybe here's the focal point of this image, or actually expanding, having bounding boxes like you would see in a tool like Photoshop, or here's what the crop should actually look like for this one image style. So you can really get fine-tuned in how you're dictating how an image might look on a teaser, for example. And again, we'll look at some of this stuff here in a minute. Another major change that was added, I think, later in the Drupal 8 lifecycle was sort of an API-first initiative. Somewhat as a side note, this was first helped develop and worked on and moved into core by some former colleagues of ours here at Aten. But this is the JSON API module. So thinking to the future, and you might not be right there, you're just looking to get off of Drupal 7, but maybe looking into the future, you're thinking about, you're hearing a lot more talk about decoupled websites. Maybe you have ambitions to grow into, say, a mobile app. And this API first initiative actually allows Drupal to become a repository for all of your content to be distributed out to whoever might need to consume it. So if you wanted to move at least the interactions for your website off of Drupal and point to, say, React or Gatsby, Next.js, any of the more modern JavaScript frameworks, you can still have Drupal be the place where you're editing your content and then have that distributed out to these other services. The same is true as if you want Drupal to be, maybe the front end, you go to the browser, you type in mywebsite.com, you're still getting the Drupal site, but you have a supplementary app that is also pulling content from the Drupal website. And this API first initiative makes that really possible. It basically just empowers you once you're on Drupal 9 to start thinking about what's the next phases for your online presence. Enhanced authoring experiences. So again, this was another feature that was rolled out along the Drupal 8 lifecycle. And I think one thing I want to mention as well is these three features that I've talked about so far weren't released at the same time. You didn't have to wait for Drupal 9 to get all of these. Media management was, I believe, Drupal 8.4, and I don't remember the exact versions, but they came out more incrementally. And so we're seeing the system evolve a lot more real time to keep up with just the pace of technology. And one of these is around authoring experiences. What we started to notice, I think, collectively as a community is, a service like Squarespace really changed how people thought about authoring content. They wanted a lot more visual experience. They wanted more real-time feedback for what the changes they're making was going to look like on the front end. If you're, from Drupal 7, you're kind of used to, you go and you click edit, you fill out a form and you click save and hope it kind of looks right. There is the preview option and that kind of gets you closer, but at least in my experience, it was never quite all the way there, right? There is still, that form, and depending on the use case that you might have, we kind of tailor this experience to what you and your authors might need. But what Drupal did introduce was the Layout Discovery API, and that powers Drupal Core's Layout Builder, as well as the Mercury Editor, which is a product being built and developed by Aten ourselves. And this allows you to have drag and drop experiences for how you author content, and you get to see the changes that you're making happen real time before you have to click the save button. And it helps provide just a much more direct connection to your content authors and how it's going to be displayed. And we can actually turn over some of that display control to them, depending on the needs of, again, the project. You can control layouts, background colors, alignments, things of that nature. And then the last thing, and I'm not going to get too much into this right now, we'll talk a little bit more about this going forward, but to make things as easy as possible, and again, one of the benefits I mentioned is sticking with Drupal is there is an inbuilt upgrade path from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9. Should this use case apply to you? And like we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But first, I kind of wanted to highlight a lot of the features that I just talked about. And so we use most of them on a project we just launched for Tufts Now. Tufts Now is the news publication for Tufts University. They were a Drupal 7 website that we migrated into Drupal 9. We did a lot of content cleanup for them, reorganized a lot of their content, and we moved them from a more standard Drupal 7 authoring experience into Mercury Editor, which allows them to have varying levels of controls of their site depending on the section. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So this is the Tufts website. And we're already logged in, and you can already see when you hover over certain sections, you get this like edit hero. And so we broke this out into two sections. Every page has like the hero section at the top and then the content down below. So if we wanted to say edit this hero, once you're in edit mode, you can kind of see certain things pop up here. So this is the widget or the component that was placed into this hero. All it does is reference an article in various displays. And so, maybe we want to switch this image around. I can go ahead and click edit. We have, here's the article being referenced. We have which style it is, and we have a list of styles and their explanations. And then one thing we've noticed a lot with online publications is they want a lot of control over how their content is not only displayed, but how it presents in certain contexts. And so there's a list of overrides we built in. And this is pretty custom to them, but something definitely well within the capabilities of Drupal 9, where they can, for this instance only, override the title of this article. They can override the subheading, or they can override the teaser image. We're not going to do that for this example, but those overrides are really important to how they sort of distribute their content and promote it in certain sections. But let's just switch this and say we want to do half left. Save that. And instantly we see what that looks like after we made that change. So we can go ahead and save. We'll close that, and we'll take a look at the content section down below. Again, we can go in, get into edit mode for this section. And then we're basically just given a giant form for this entire page to, we could add a new section if we wanted to. Within this section, we could add new components. We could edit this existing component, or we could decide that this section actually needs to be at the top. So we can drag that to the top there, rearrange that. We can maybe say, actually, I don't like the background color of this section, so I can edit this. And we're going to say we want it to be their brand blue, change that. Attention was paid to make sure that all of the components that you can place work with the configured background colors. That way we can, account for things like accessibility and things of that nature. But that was all taken care of. And it just provides a really nice, seamless experience for them. Now, this is their landing pages. We want to craft an entire new page from scratch for their articles. And we'll just scroll to the bottom real quick, click save. For their articles, let's go to this one. I got to close out of the editor. There we go. We'll go to this page. Their article pages, we needed to take a slightly different approach on because you want some sort of consistency. We want the control over the header, and we want an authoring experience in the main column, but we don't want like the sidebar to change dramatically and move around or vanish. We want users to have this similar reading experience from article to article. And so we implemented this authoring experience in a much more pared back way. So you can still go in, you can edit this hero. And we could say, yeah, this should be on the right, and we'll save that. And we see that switch. You can save, close. But then down below, the only place you get that authoring experience is now within this main column. So you can go in and add new content, look through this. This is, since it's just text, it's one large piece. But let's say we wanted to add a call to action here. So what I'll do is I'll just take these first few paragraphs. Save this. We'll add a new paragraph or add a new text widget. And now that we have these two broken out, I can go in, add a new component in between them for a call to action. You can pull an image from their media library. This is something somebody else already uploaded and it's available to me. The other thing too is you can provide any sort of filtering if you want tagging on your images to allow your authors to quickly find images they might be needing. I'll go ahead and insert that. Give it some content, give it a link. And then we can go ahead and save. And instantly that's been dropped into this section. And like I said, you see what it's going to look like before your users do. I think the last thing that I'll mention is the image authoring. You know, when we're talking about images of this size getting used all over, we want to make sure that there was some level of control. So we can drop into the edit tab, which is a much more familiar experience if you're coming from Drupal 7. This is what I kind of call the metadata section at this point. You know, it's things that will always be true. Here's the title. There's some summary text. We have fields for social media content, you know, how this looks when it's shared on Facebook and Twitter and things like that. So if we go to media, we see the image and I can click edit. And this is using a module in Drupal called Focal Point that gives me the ability to say, like, I actually want to just really focus on the rainbow here, and we'll set that. And then I can actually click preview and see a list of all of the varying ways that this image might get cropped, adjusted to use that focal point that we just set. So we can kind of see now the prism is a lot more off center because of how things are getting cropped. But this is everywhere it's going to be used on the website, and you kind of get a glance look at, like, here's how this is going to look. Now, this more simplistic view really worked for them. If they needed more, we could set this up in a way where they could actually have a more Photoshop style bounding box to drag and drop over this. And that uses a module in Drupal called the Image Crop API. And so that's super handy in terms of the authoring experience. But I think from there, that's really just kind of demonstrating a lot of the new features that come with the Drupal 9 website. And yeah, I think from there we'll jump back, and I'll actually hand this over to Jordan now.
Thanks, Joe. You know, I love that Mercury Editor. The first time I saw it in action, being able to see the content themed the way that it's going to look on the front end of the site for all users. You know, while I'm involved in the editing process, I just thought that was fantastic. That was super helpful. So let me share my screen, and I'll pick up here where James had left off. So James mentioned a little bit earlier about migration, and that so you know the shift from Drupal 7 to, at the time it was Drupal 8, and now you know we're looking at Drupal 9, is the biggest shift in the history of Drupal, because we began to use the Symfony framework underneath everything. And so that, knowing that it was a big transition for a lot of people, the Drupal community put a lot of effort into what can we do to make this as easy as possible for people who have to migrate out of Drupal 7. So in some cases, there's an automated migration process that, depending on the structure of your website, it could completely migrate all of your content, you know, exactly one-to-one from your existing content types into, you know, Drupal 9, the same content type with the same fields with the same content. It depends on what you're doing with your website and how you know, sophisticated it is, and so on. But for example, I have a training blog that I kept when I was training for my second Ironman triathlon, and it's super simple. I have an article content type, and it's got a rich text field and a headline. There's nothing complicated about it. So that's a perfect candidate for a one-to-one migration into Drupal 9. And then even if you don't have the simplest structure in your Drupal 7 site, the automated Drupal 7 to Drupal 9 migration might not take you all the way there, but it builds, it basically looks through your Drupal 7 site, finds all the different kinds of content that you have, your different content types, and the fields within each, and it creates migration files that basically are recipes for how Drupal 9 should migrate into the new site. And even if it doesn't get you all the way there, it does a tremendous amount of the legwork for you in setting up your Drupal 9 site. And then from there, your development partner can help you with what's left. In any case, even if you do have a direct one-to-one migration that's available to you because your site is simple enough for that, you do need to port over at least your theme. So the theme is the set of code and instructions that tell the user's browser how to make the website look. So, and a Drupal 7 theme won't work in Drupal 9. So that will need to be ported over to Drupal 9 by your partner. And if you have any custom modules that are part of your Drupal 7 site, chances are very good that some of those will need to be adjusted as well and brought into compatibility with Drupal 9. But still, the automated migration gets you a long way. And as I said, even if your site is more sophisticated in what it's accomplishing than the one-to-one migration goes, we have a really good starting point once we've run the automated process to do things that are more sophisticated or more complex. For example, I love this Mercury Editor user experience. That was one of the things that people used to say about Drupal, is that the content editing experience is not as good. And now I'd say it's leading edge. And if I'm migrating my site into Drupal 9, I want to build Mercury Editor pages so that my team, when they need to go and make content updates, everything is right there where they expect it to be. So it's not just migrating our content at that point, it's building pages within the Mercury Editor sort of ecosystem. So we create the sections that James showed us. Here's a section with 2 columns. On the right column, we're going to have an image, left column. And during the course of migration, we're creating those blocks of content and putting them into the sections and saving it so that, well, again, when your content team is ready to make some changes, it's all right there at their fingertips, and they have the new user experience that is so powerful. Also, when we're migrating, we'll leverage the media library. So a really common practice in Drupal 7, if there was, for example, an image that you needed to use in multiple places around the website, was to have a content type for images. So with an image field and title and whatever else you might have had. And so we would migrate that into the media library today, and then adjust how we're using those images elsewhere in the code. So that's another example of something we can do that's a little more sophisticated, depending on what you're trying to accomplish with your new version of your website. Remember, Drupal 7 started back in 2011. And so your Drupal 7 site may be, 11 years old, or might be several years old. And it might be that your plans for your website for the next 3 or 4 years are a little more ambitious than they were back when you built it in Drupal 7. You want to accomplish some different things. I'll give you one more example of something sort of cool and sophisticated that we can do just in the course of migration. We have amazing amount of control over the contents of rich text fields. And in this little code block that I've put up on the screen, there are 2 examples of how you could embed an image. So the top part, that's from Drupal 7. You see we've got a paragraph tag, some square brackets. We've got a node ID, that's the NID, that's referring to a specific image node. And then we close everything out. If you were to have a Drupal 9 site render that content right now, you would see exactly what you see here on the screen. You'd see the double square brackets, the NID, and so on. There would be no image there because Drupal 9 embeds entities differently. And that second example is what it looks like in Drupal 9. And so what I'm here to tell you is that in the process of migration, Drupal can rip through all of your rich text fields and look for fields embedded this way, look for images embedded in this Drupal 7 way, and do all the background work that it needs to do to find that image media entity, because we've migrated them into the media library, and then embed them properly for Drupal 9. So again, post-migration, your team does not have to click through pages, look for missing images and funky square bracket code appearing on the page. That's all handled during the migration process. So that's another example of just how sophisticated we can get to accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish with your new website. And I spoke a little bit about this earlier. Your new websites, your goals for the next 3 or 4 years might have more integration with your marketing automation systems. It might be a new look and feel that you're trying to impart. You might want to reorganize your content somewhat. And for example, we just launched a website for Guttmacher.org. And they transferred their website from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9. And they used to have a content type called article, and it had 3 decidedly different kinds of content that were all jammed into articles. And when we migrated them to Drupal 9, we decided, well, these should be a policy analysis piece, these should be research articles, and these should be statements. So again, you can do some reorganizing of your content in the migration process.